Hello, everybody. To me, today's events really are summed up with two words: nostalgia and aspiration. So thank you for being with us today, and first I'll walk us through some memories that I haven't had the pleasure of being part of, but things that I've heard, things I've researched that I think really help us understand what AFF is and has been, and then I'll ask you to aspire with me a little bit about our vision and the things that we're interested in doing moving forward that will be built off of the foundation that so many of you built with your hands. So thank you so much for being part of that process. So first, to reminisce, I'll tell you a little bit about how I came to AFF and then a little bit about AFF's history that I've heard. So I came to AFF by a supervisor of mine at a previous organization where I worked, Charles Koch Institute. And my supervisor told me that if I wanted to figure out really what I wanted to do moving forward, I should get involved with AFF. And I should particularly meet Roger Custer. And I had heard Roger Custer tossed around. I knew he was an illustrious alumni of the CAP program, but I really didn't know who he was. So I said, all right, I'll send him an email. So I got on the metro and trudged into DC. It was one of the first times I had actually crossed the river since moving to the Northern Virginia, DC area. I got lost several times. And then I ended up at AFF's headquarters and chatted with Roger for about an hour, and realized in that conversation that he was preparing for a board meeting and he had 1,000 priorities, but he pushed them off his desk and talked to me. And that got my attention. And I realized if that's how the executive director treats young professionals, then that's how that organization probably treats young professionals. So 2 years later, after serving some time with Charles Koch Institute and Foundation and having a blast, I got a phone call from Roger saying that they were expanding the team. And knowing what AFF stood for, knowing what Roger stood for, there was no way I could do anything other than look into it. So I'm extremely grateful to be here today, and I'm grateful for all of the investment that you have already put into AFF and what you will put into the future. So a little bit about that AFF history. So my understanding of AFF's past is there were a lot of really great networking events, some happy hours, and doublethink. And some of the policy roundtables that really stood out to me were one called Neo-Prohibition, Smoking and Trans Fat Bans, another one called Organ Markets, Ethical Dilemma or Obvious Solution, and then a third is Marriage Outdated. And I'm also told there was a really funny panel once on dating. So as you can see from the very beginning, AFF has been about speaking to, as has already been stated on this panel, millennials, and speaking to people in their 20s, the issues they care about. And that related to doublethink as well. As I read through some past issues of doublethink in preparation for today's remarks, I came across an article called Zombie Politics. I had myself quite a laugh and realized that that was just another indication of the fact that doublethink and America's Future Foundation have been flexible and have adapted to the culture and to the things that the audience of AFF really care about. So it's pretty great. I was amused. And in addition to doublethink, policy roundtables, networking arguments, or networking events, there are also just so many great success stories of people who were there in the beginning and who've gone on to do such great things for liberty and who've helped to climb those great heights. So 3 stories I want to highlight are of Claire Kittle-Dixon, Tim Carney, and Kristen Soltis Anderson. So first, Claire Kittle-Dixon, who was actually my mentor in the Koch Associate Program, so I've had the pleasure of getting to know her. She's marvelous. Claire Kittle-Dixon now heads up Talent Market, which if you haven't heard of Talent Market, Google it as soon as you're done here today, because Claire is one of the top recruiters of talent across the entire Liberty Network, in DC, in the States, and she primarily focuses on finding leaders. So she's taken that AFF paradigm of identifying those potential leaders, of helping them to develop, of investing in them, and then placing them in some of the highest positions the network has to offer. And if you ask Claire about her involvement with AFF, she'll tell you that in her first AFF event, she met a boyfriend, a best friend, and someone that ended up getting her first job in the Liberty Movement in one event. So I hope that all of you have had interactions with AFF that were that productive, but even if you haven't, then maybe you can relate more to Tim Carney. So Tim Carney will tell you that his first experience with AFF was being placed on a panel for which he was not necessarily prepared, just kind of thrown in at the last minute, and it was his first public speaking opportunity since coming to DC. It was hugely formative for him and opened up an entire world, really, that he had never considered before. And now, Tim is a senior political columnist for the Washington Examiner and gives back to AFF as a mentor and is very involved. The third story, Kristen Soltis Anderson, is similar. She had some of her first public speaking and writing opportunities through America's Future Foundation, and has actually just published a book that will be releasing in July called The Selfie Vote, which very appropriately is about millennials, their voting behavior, their political behavior, and exactly how millennials' hearts can be won for the ideas of freedom. We're going to be hosting an event with her at some point later in July to feature her book, but she's a well-known pundit and someone who very fondly looks back on America's Future Foundation as part of her start. So with those success stories in mind, I'd like to frame for you a little bit of the contemporary and future forward-looking elements of AF, keeping in mind that we want to identify more Claires, more Tims, more Kristens. We want to empower them, not just in DC, but as our first two panelists discussed, in the States. So AF is going to continue to provide programs like the ones we've provided previously, networking events, roundtables, happy hours, publications, and some of the other programs that I'd like to tell you a little bit about that are related are some of the ones that are going on right now. So the first one that comes to mind is called Welcome to Washington. This event's been hosted several times now. It's very popular. It's often a collaborative event. This time we'll be co-hosting with American Enterprise Institute and Charles Koch Institute. And Welcome to Washington was actually the first AF program that I found out about because I got an email inviting me to come when I first got to town. So it's an event that's deliberately pitched toward new interns, new hires who probably like me at that time had made it across the river to DC once or twice since moving to Northern Virginia, and really welcoming them and helping them understand, where do I go? Who do I meet? How do I get connected? How do I know that I'm not an island? And how do I know what I want to be someday after spending more time in this great city? So Welcome to Washington will be coming up in just a couple of weeks, actually. We also have another event series that's become an institution called Cultivation Crew. Cultivation Crew is focused on development professionals, and it brings in really big leaders in development, especially in DC, but also sometimes in the States when they can make it, and puts a lot of development professionals in one room who want to learn things like, how do I make a compelling ask? What is planned giving? How do I talk about legacy gifts without being uncomfortable? So some of those things that you're never going to find out unless you just ask. And you're never going to be able to ask unless you're in a friendly setting. So AF tries to provide that friendly setting for development professionals, as well as ones who are a little bit more senior to help mentor along the ones who are rising and just getting their start. We also have a new program called Let's Talk that's wrapping up its first iteration. So Let's Talk is about communicating effectively and in a way that's actually engaging to the average person about ideas of liberty. So the way Let's Talk is structured is there are 4 events, after which there is an upcoming competition in July. So the first 4 events feature an issue that's particularly contentious and put a policy expert and a communications expert next to each other on the panel to give the rundown of these are the 5 points you should keep in mind, and then these are the pitfalls to absolutely avoid at all costs. And then with that information, participants are able to frame arguments, to practice, to engage each other, to debate, so that if they have metro conversations or elevator conversations, they know what points to emphasize and how to say them. So the one that's upcoming is Let's Talk Environment, because how many times have we heard, oh, those conservatives just pollute everything, they hate the Siberian Arctic fox frog, and just want everybody to focus on money, money, money. Well, how do we debunk that? Well, we're going to find out. So I'm excited to go through that journey with the experts there and also to see what we can get as far as talent identification and helping to empower people through the competition. So Roger also mentioned that we do a lot of collaborative programs. So I know a lot of you in this room represent various organizations with whom we've already collaborated or could collaborate in the future. So I would enumerate the list, but we would be here until the gala started. But we've done a lot of collaborations with think tanks, with some universities, with centers, with some of the bigger groups, some of the smaller groups. We've hosted at various organizations, co-hosted, collaborated, you name it, to bring a bunch of different ideas to in front of millennials and asking them really to take a next step somehow. And then the other program that I'll very quickly highlight is actually what we do when someone says they want to be a member. So the membership program is one that actually Britt Verreiter is running, and mentors and mentees are matched up through the membership program, but members also have an opportunity to be exposed to exclusive events. So the most recent event that was actually only a week and a half ago was a private briefing with Representative Paul Ryan. And so about 20 members sat down in a room in one of the House office buildings and asked questions. and told him about their dreams and their organizations and the things that they wanted to see for America, not unlike our conversation earlier today. And he shared his thoughts, his vision for America, and exactly the role that he thought specific policy issues played. And it was very casual. It was something that was unique to witness, let alone to be a part of. So those are the types of things that are available when someone becomes a member of America's Future Foundation. And then a couple of areas that we want to explore with future programming. There are two particular areas that we're very excited about. So please share your ideas. I'll be around all day. Let me know what your ideas are. But the two areas we're interested in are the Hill and student to young professional bridge programs. So we're interested in the Hill because we have an ambassador, actually, and a very involved member named Christian Rice, and a number of other people who are involved with our organization who've told us a little bit about the Hill and some of their pain points. And one of the points Christian consistently brings up is people on the Hill want to move up. It's a very clear ladder. It's an escalator with you're this, and then you're that, and then you're this, and then you're that. But not very many people know how to move from a this to a that. And not many people invest as that's into thises. So figuring out a way to get some of the more experienced people who've been there for a while to breathe life into and to invest in some of the people that are new to town, and even to equip the new to town people with the skills to pull themselves up, is just not an investment that is largely made given the culture on the Hill. I mean, people are busy. It's not that they're disinterested, it's largely a question of capacity. So we would like to try to come in and help with some of that professional development and membership and mentorship that can happen there on the Hill. And then the second area are student to young professionals. Now, when I was a student, I was an idealist on fire, and I still am. And there are oftentimes students who are idealists on fire who then graduate, and the realities of student debt, of new marriages, of mortgages, of moving to a new city, of not knowing anybody, of focusing on just the stuff of life can get in the way and can snuff out some of that fire. So if in the chapters and in DC, we can continue to fan that with opportunities, with programs, with mentors, with ways to stay engaged with liberty, then hopefully that fire can burn for a lifetime. So trying to build the programs necessary to build that up are something that we're very interested in. So an example of a program that's been tried that I'm very excited about is the Emerging Leaders Program. And Emerging Leaders just identified 10 promising and upcoming graduating seniors of a pool of applicants, or actually those who are nominated. And those 10 will be featured at our Welcome to Washington event. Partner organizations will get a packet with their photos, their bios, and we will also do our best to network them and make sure that when they come to town or when they enter a city where there's a chapter, that they are very quickly recognized as someone with a lot of potential to lead. So an example of one of the emerging leaders is a fellow named William Juergens. So while William was a student, he was an intern with Senator Lee and the Institute for Humane Studies. He was also a campus coordinator with Students for Liberty and a state chair for Young Americans for Liberty. So given that pedigree, he's someone in whom we should be investing, and he wants to be a professor someday. So until that point and for a lifetime thereafter, AFF wants to be there to try to recognize that leadership potential in him and get him where he's going to be most successful. So that's a little bit of information about what we've been, who we are, and who we hope to be. So thank you for being a little bit nostalgic, and thank you for aspiring with me. And the fact that you're in this room, to me, demonstrates that you care about the same things we care about. So let me know what ideas you have, what passions you have, what collaborations we can engage in and help us to make America's future an even more beautiful and prosperous thing. Thank you.